Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm gonna be talking about the books that I read in 2024. So these are actually all the books that I read. Let me just grab them and I hope that I don't drop them. Okay. All right. Oh my God, these are heavy. That's an arm workout right there. Okay, these are all the books that I read. So it's just gonna be like a really short summary or really short impression talk where I'll share what I felt about the book. So the first one, which is at the top because it's the smallest in size, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Alright, so every other self-help book that I have read always mentions this one book, that it's like the epitome of self-help books out there. It's considered one of the best self-help books and I read it just because of that. I wouldn't say I wasn't disappointed, but I'm pretty sure that I was this close to DNFing this book. I have realized this year that I have sort of developed an aversion towards self-help books. And I'm not surprised, honestly, because every other self-help book, it's just like a pile of trash, honestly. I don't know. I feel like when you are not actually practically doing things, you're not learning. And when you read about some problem or some issue in your life in a book form, in like these many pages, 300, 200, whatever, it's just a lot of information at one place and your mind sort of stops fathoming what you're reading. And when the issue actually comes, you forget what you read about. How to win friends and influence people. So it's just full of tips and tricks that the author says that if you do these things in your life, you will become more approachable, you will become more likable, and you will attract more people in your life and stuff like that. So basically things that you do right now that you are not supposed to do. All right, so the next book is Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer, and it is a narrative nonfiction. This was my first time reading a narrative nonfiction, and honestly, I was blown away. I think I have given this book 5 out of 5 on Goodreads. So basically, as the cover suggests, it's about mountains. Mount Everest, to be specific. So the author, with the expedition that he was a part of, they decide that they're gonna be climbing the Mount Everest. And it's just basically his journey and the struggles that he faced, climatic conditions, just like normal human behaviors of other people. I feel like if you go with a group of people on these expeditions, you will see the worst faces of people up there. But this was a solid read and I enjoyed it through and through. And I got to know so many cool things about climbing mountains in general, like what they do, what kind of clothes they wear, how they survive up there and stuff like that, how low oxygen messes up with your head and things like that. So it was a really interesting read for me, especially for someone who had no idea what mountain climbing was. The next one is The 10,000 Doors of January, and it's written by Alex E. Harrow. And honestly, I got introduced to this book by Nimra Ahmed. I read in one of her Q&As that she does on Instagram that this is apparently one of her most favorite books. So I was really intrigued to read this book. I wanted to know what this is about that has mesmerized one of the best writers of Pakistan. It's actually pretty foggy in my mind. I do not really remember a lot of the details and it doesn't happen a lot. Like I'm the type of reader who reads this stuff and then when I see the book, I remember pretty vividly what it was about. So the next book, or rather a series, is a 2-part series, is a novel by Michael Connelly. And it's The Poet, and the second part of it, the sequel, The Narrows. And this was actually my first time reading Michael Connelly. And this ensued or introduced me to Bosch. And then I spent probably 2 or 3 months binge watching that show, the Amazon Prime one, Bosch. That's the name. And I was just completely in that universe for, I don't know how, 2 or 3 months, I feel like. But coming back to the 2 novels that I read for the very first time, and basically the first one is it's related to The Narrows because it's obviously the sequel, but at the same time, The Narrows goes on a different sort of tangent. But this one was really interesting. This was some really good stuff. The way the author kept us guessing, and then even after like came to a conclusion and we read about the conclusion, but it's still a good chunk of the story was left, and I was left guessing what's going to happen next. I was like, this is definitely not the end, so some twist is coming, and then eventually it does come, and it just leaves you gasping. So that's where the second book opens up, and you kind of instantly connect the dots and you're like, wow, that's some clever writing. And then Bosch is introduced and you are just thrown in his world. All right, so the next one is something that I recently read actually. I cannot really talk about it much, but I haven't even put it on my Goodreads because the author is on the boycott list because of the whole Palestine thing. And I got to know about that after reading the book. I was searching for the writer and I just came to know about it. And I realized that she was pro-genocide, and it just made me upset because she has written a really great book. It's on video games. If you know, you know what I'm talking about. But because of that, I'm not going to talk about the author. I'm not going to talk about the book. But I would say that it was a decent read. And I wish that I had met the author and I had met the book in different circumstances. I wish that the author was a bit more learned, a bit more aware of what's going on. Alright, so moving on to another one that I read, but it's on my DNF pile actually. It's this one. It's an Urdu novel. It's Rab Se Jurne Ka Sabar by Huraira. And I was actually really looking forward to reading this book. But by the condition of the book, you can say I didn't read it because it's still pretty new. I read the first few pages. I just knew where this was headed. And I read some of the middle parts. And then I just couldn't read anything further. But the story where it was headed, it's just not my cup of tea. Maybe somebody who is a beginner to religion, I don't know, it's too preachy for me. Another one that was one of my favorites of this year is The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And I honestly rave about this book all the time. It's such a good read. I have read both obviously positive comments and also critical comments on this book, and according to some, this portrays a really flowery picture of relationships. If you are going into a relationship or if you are in a relationship, this is such a good read for you. So basically, according to the author, if each of us know the love languages, our own and of the other person that we are connected with, and we strive to fulfill or fill the tanks of their love language, then we are guaranteed basically a good relationship, a good life, a peaceful relationship. So according to the author, most of the times, or majority of the times, when tension arises in relationships, it's because of the fact that both the parties are negligent towards each other's love language, if that makes sense. All right, so another book that I read is again a 2-part series, and it's an Urdu novel. It is Pir Kamil by Umar Ahmad and Abe Hayat, 2 of my most favorite novels of all time. This was actually a reread. I think Pir Kamil was my 3rd time and Abe Hayat was my 2nd time. I would do it all over again, honestly, because the stories are just so gripping. And I just love the universe of both of these books. I just want to be in it all the time. Alright, so the next book is something that I have been reading for maybe 2 or 3 years, and on and off, not regularly. And I would always pick it up whenever I was feeling down. This book always had my back. And finally this year I completed it, and it is Secrets of Divine Love by A. Helwa. One of the things that attracted me towards it, the way this book has been written, like the sentences, they're not sentences, they're poetry, but it's in prose form. It's like she has weaved the words in the sentences so beautifully that it literally feels as if they are pearls on page. The topic itself and the way she has written the entire book is commendable, obviously, but it also gives you so much hope and fills your heart with so much love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that it's just incredible. Right after reading this book, I read Yasmin Mojahed's Reclaim Your Heart, and unfortunately, I failed to connect with the book. the writing style sort of felt really off, even though I absolutely love hearing her. I feel like she's a great speaker, but I found that her writing style just felt a bit off, and I couldn't connect to what she was trying to say, honestly. So unfortunately, that was another book that I DNF'd this year. And the next book that I read was again DNF, because I just couldn't connect to it again. It is All the Little Bird Hearts by Victoria Lloyd Barlow. I hope I am pronouncing the name right, but this novel is actually a little bit different, and I so want to know what happens in this novel, but I just cannot move past 100 pages because I was 100 pages in and I couldn't get into the novel. So from the get-go, I knew that the main character in the novel is autistic, but the writing style sort of seemed a little bit different. So I was like, okay, what's going on? So I researched the author and I realized that the author herself is autistic. So an autistic person has written an autistic character. So obviously we are literally sort of like in the head of an autistic person. We are experiencing things and seeing things like an autistic person sees. And it's so interesting and such a different angle from what we normally read. But unfortunately for me, I just couldn't get into it because there were literally passages after passages of details of things like a daily routine maybe, or how somebody's house was decorated, or how things were moving in somebody's house, you know, the family dynamic or the relationship between spouses, or maybe, you know, how a person was and stuff. So it was really descriptive to me, and I do not like reading too many descriptive things. I just want to get on and I want to read the dialogues, and I just want to get into the action and the meat of the story rather than, you know, understanding what the plot is about, if that makes sense. So this was unfortunately that kind of novel, and I just failed to get into it. All right, moving on to the last two books that I read this year. And again, they are a part of a series. This is a 3-part series actually, and it's written by one of my most favorite writers, Frederick Backman. So last year I read Beartown and I realized that it is a 3-part series, so I ordered both of these and I got done reading all the 3 of them. So obviously I didn't read Beartown again, but the second part of it, this one, Us Against You, and then The Winners, the 3rd part, and it's like, this is humongous. But again, I love reading Frederick Backman, and the story is penned so beautifully, it's weaved so beautifully. All in all, this was such a nice read. I absolutely loved Beartown as a town, but at the same time, obviously, I know the struggles of the people, their shortcomings basically. As a reader, you know it, and sometimes I would just want to go inside and just yell at the top of my voice, please don't do this. But obviously, you're just a reader, a passive reader. You can only think and imagine things in your head. That's it. All right, so I read 2 more books. The first one was Diyar Dil by Farhat Ishtiyaq. It's a novel, and I was introduced to it via a drama, a Pakistani drama by the same name, Diyar Dil. And I watched it. It was probably my very first Pakistani dramas of the current lot that I watched. And I don't know when the year was, but I watched it so many years ago. And I vividly remember watching it in the early hours of the morning, and late at night under my blanket I would watch it. And it was such a vibe. It gave off warm feeling, and it was such a nice story as well. The acting was great. The characters were great, and surprisingly actually, the novel is a lot different than what the drama was about. And the second book that I read was What Do Muslims Believe by Ziauddin Sardar. I will again post a picture right here because I don't have the copy of it. It's a really basic book, a really basic introduction of like who Muslims are, what do they believe, what is their belief system, what do they think, where things came from, and stuff like that. So it's like a very basic journey towards the religion of Islam, and also from the history of Muslims to where we are standing right now. So those were all the books that I read this year. That's it. We have come to the end of this video. Let me know in the comments your thought about the video, the books that you read this year, and what was your goal and how many books you read this year. I will see you guys in the next video, inshallah. Till then, take care. God bless you. Assalamu alaikum. Bye.